reduce their personal footprint, and their supermarkets have started putting labels on food products in the supermarket. So there is, like, if you go to supermarkets, there used to be, and there still are, a section for organic foods. Now they've started putting these sections of low carbon foods. So there is this demand from consumers increasing, and that's creating a new market. And then exporters sitting in Europe, of course, are passing that on to us and asking our exporters sitting in Pakistan that we want low carbon rice. And of course, so that's creating an opportunity as well for us. That if we demonstrate our rice is low carbon, we can capture that market. But of course, to do any of that, we need data, we need evidence. Without that, it's just an opinion. And of course, I think I already covered, agriculture this nearly covers agriculture, and land use covers nearly half of our emissions. And without addressing those, we cannot achieve our national targets that are in our NDC. So, as we are also, of course, the signatory of the Paris Agreement. So, alternate wet and dry, or AWD in short, is of course one of the key solutions we are looking at that has shown potential in achieving the decarbonization targets in rice. So not just the emission reduction, but also it has shown, as I think Takashi mentioned in the beginning, it was originally developed perhaps more than 2 decades ago as a water-saving technique. But water-saving and methane production, they are part of the same mechanism. So whenever we reduce the flooded conditions, we of course also reduce methane emissions. So it has both the benefits of methane emission reduction, but also water savings. And among many other benefits, I just want to quickly mention one of the key benefits that's there is reduced crop lodging. And lodging, of course, being an agricultural community sitting here, lodging means when the crop falls because of wind. And the reason it helps reduce that, because when we are doing alternate wetting and drying, it helps roots to grow down and it creates an anchor. So very quickly, what does AWD mean? Traditionally we try to use something which is continuous flooding or near continuous flooding, where there is standing water in most throughout the season, which of course creates low oxygen conditions. And it's not that the rice crop uses a lot of water. It's because there is freestanding water, there is a lot of losses through evaporation. So in AWD, of course, we let the water to go down below surface to a certain level, let's say 15 centimeter, and once it hits that threshold, we flood it again. This creates an alternate wetting and drying cycle. We used some of those tubes you can see in the bottom. We use those to monitor, and that helps us schedule the irrigations. So how do these? What is the mechanism or biogeochemistry of these emissions? In a typical, let's say, a wheat crop or any non-rice crop, the major emissions are in the form of nitrous oxide, which of course is a very important greenhouse gas, nearly 300 times as powerful as carbon dioxide. And it mainly originates from fertilizers, nitrogen-based fertilizers, say urea. And but in these systems, methane emissions are low because we don't have flooded conditions. But then we go to rice crops. Of course, it's mostly flooded, so it's low oxygen conditions, and that's kicks in what we call methanogenesis, or methanogenic or methane-producing bacteria are very active in that environment. So when we flood the soil, those bacteria become alive, and they of course result in methane emissions. And most of that emission that is transported from soil, because that's where they are produced, out in the atmosphere, mostly through the stem of the plant. So if you remove those plants from floods, the emissions will also reduce, because there is no, it will only bubble a little bit, but the main transporting mechanism will not be there. So when we say AWD or alternative wetting drying, we are mainly switching between these two systems. So when we are in the drier condition of phase of AWD, methane emissions go low, but we do risk the increase in nitrous oxide emissions in that period. And then when we flood it, again, nitrous oxide emissions go down, but methane emissions go down. So we alternate between these two. So see, how does that impact the total greenhouse gas balance? I think that's the important part. So we will see that in a moment. The AWD trial that is being supported by Noriko's TA in Punjab, this has two parts. So one is the farmer adoption part, where we've done more than 200 farmers in 2 districts. So next presentation, Baba will talk about this in detail. And in this talk, I will mainly cover the one on greenhouse gas mitigation part. So in that one, we mainly done this on research station. And of course, I think I mentioned before, the ultimate goal is that we want to understand before we even start promoting AWD, we don't even need any data. So if it's Punjab government or Sindh government who would like to promote this, the policy needs to be informed by evidence. And we don't have any evidence or scientifically published papers that really truly done a proper quantification of water savings. But for this purpose, I think or emission reduction. So I think evidence is that, and again, national greenhouse gas inventory, we need to have our country-specific emission factors, tier 2 emission factors. And then there's a lot of talk on carbon markets. Sana is here from Ministry of Climate Change. They are doing a lot of work on this. But if you ask the private sector, why don't you invest in a carbon market project? First question they will ask is how much money I'm going to make. And in this case, the money is equivalent to how much methane we are able to reduce from AWD. Now, without that information, I don't think as an investor I will put any money on that. So this data is also very important for promoting carbon markets in future. Okay, I think we are having a glitch again. Next, upside. Thank you. So this is a that's fine. Thank you. So this experiment has we were conducting at 2 research sites, one in Shekhupura and one in Okara. And the 2 treatments we used are continuous flooding and then the alternate wetting and drying. So we are aiming that we will do at least 2 rice seasons and 2 wheat seasons. We have already completed 1 rice season, and with the results I'll present the results in a minute. And right now we are in the middle of wheat season. And so the research design for researchers' interest is randomized complete plot design with 4 replicates. And we started with Basmati 515, which is the most popular variety among exporters. So, and this is the plots. You can see that's the pictures from the field. These are 10 meter by 10 meter plots. And that's when we set up the plots, the first measurements over there. Then on the left and bottom, you can see that's when the crop was mature. So we do these measurements in the field with those chambers, you can see. And then we transfer those samples in the glass vials on the right top side. And then we send those samples to Germany, where Karlsruhe Institute of Technology, our colleagues and collaborators there, they analyze these samples and send us how much methane or nitrous oxide is in those samples. And the reason we are sending them, of course, have analytical facilities in Pakistan. And that's one of the major constraints in doing this kind of research, and I think we are exploring all options to enable and have those facilities in Pakistan so that we can expand this research. So, as I said, this is done in 2 districts. So these are the same 2 districts that Barbara will talk about for the farmer trials. But these because we needed a good control on irrigation and generally the management of those plots, because it's a scientific experiment. So we did it on the research farms. One of them is Rice Research Institute in Shekhupura, and other is in Okara. And the reason we selected these 2 sites, as you can see on the right-hand side, this map of agroecological zones from FAO. You can see on the Sheikhupura is in the high rainfall zone, and then Pokhara is in a relatively drier. And Sheikhupura is the traditional rice growing area, Pokhara is relatively new. But rice is growing, expanding in that area. So we want to understand how the difference in climate as well as soil types impacts the emissions. So again, this is the data from observed rainfall during the season. And on the left-hand side is Sheikhupura, on the right is Pokhara. So you can see here there is a lot of rain here, and that's and the total rainfall in Sheikhupura was 578 compared with Pokhara, where it was much lower at 344. But also not just the total number, but distribution is also important. In Sheikhupura, we received most of the rainfall in the first 2 months, and it was more than the normal average rainfall that they received, and that has impacted. So if you look at the arrows on the top, that's the period when we were able to apply AWD. Now in Sheikhupura, because it kept raining and all the plots were flooded, so we couldn't really apply AWD because our farming systems don't have any drainage system. So it's naturally when it dries and goes down. So that means in Sheikhupura, we could only apply it for a very short 6-week period. And then Pokhara, we managed to do it for a much longer period because the soil was relatively well draining and our land wasn't well developed, and which means that even if when we did receive rainfall, it usually rained pretty quickly. How does that impact our water use? So, as expected, because we received more rainfall in Sheikhupura, water use overall was also less, because we didn't have to apply. We only had to apply irrigation really later in the season when plots started to dry a bit. And that means there was 15% water saving. That equals to 271 millimeters. Or if you were to use a pump to pump the water from ground, this would equal to $21 per hectare. And then so the numbers are very different. Water use was much higher because we had to apply a lot of water, it kept raining, and quality is relatively high. So over there we managed to save around 1,110 millimeters, or if you convert it into dollars, that's close to $88. Okay, that's the real deal. Methane emissions. How did that go? So in Sheikhupura, there was a 7% reduction overall. But let's just ignore the percentages for a second. If you look at the actual reduction in CO2 equivalents, it equal to half a ton of CO2 equivalent per hectare. And in Pokhara, the overall emissions were much lower because the flooding conditions, even in the continuous flooding treatment, you couldn't keep it flooded because whenever you apply water, it just would go down very quickly. So overall, what does those numbers mean? 0.5 tons means, and if you go by the number, I think the European number, if it was $80, this means it's $40, and so on. So definitely a huge reduction, and I think this we are comparing the total emission reduction throughout the season. But if you actually look at the period when the AWD was applied, for example in Sheikhupura, this 7% is actually equal to more than 30%. But because this was an unusual season, we received more than also low. So I think this is another reason we need to continue this for another. How this, and we are emphasizing that this 7% will be much higher in normal years. The nitrous oxide emissions were almost negligible. And if you compare it with methane, I think if you can convert that into the CO2 equivalents, you can see it's only 0.01 difference. So of course percentages look a bit high, but if you look at the actual absolute numbers, it's only 0.01 increase, and over there is 0.02 tons of CO2 equivalent decrease. So when you combine these together, methane and N2O, and so overall in Sheikhupura we reduced the global warming potential by 6.5%, and in Okara was much higher at 64%, but the absolute numbers are not too different. It's 0.7 ton over there, it's 0.5 tons of CO2 equivalent over here. And again, methane was the dominant greenhouse gas with little impact from nitrogen cells. And of course, for farmers, yield is the most important part, so they don't care about emissions. And this is on the top, you can see this is a drone image of all the plots. And the one in the red, these are AWD. So you can see those plots look really neat, there is no lodging impact. But all the other plots, all these yellowish parts, these are all lodging impacts. And if you look at the close-up of one of those plots in the bottom, most of the non-AWD plots, we saw significant lodging. And it's, and that of course, how does that impact yield? We'll see. So I think we weren't expecting this big differences, honestly, but there was 15% increase in Sheikhupura in yield, which equals to $183 per hectare, and in Okara it was much higher at 30%. So I don't think we will see these in every year. So I think we need to calibrate our expectations and your expectations. Usually in AWD, the expectation is that we increase our profitability by reducing our inputs, but we the yield. And in some cases, we do improve the yield. Usually it's not too hard. But in this case, of course, I think lodging had contributed significantly. So whenever there is lodging, of course, this yield increase will be higher. But it's really encouraging results. I think farmers were really happy, and we saw similar effects in the farmer trials, which power of. And then when we combine the yield and emissions data, so because from consumer point of view, they are not interested in emissions per hectare. They look at saying, okay, I'm buying this a kilogram of rice. What is the carbon footprint of this kilogram of rice? And that you calculate by dividing the emissions by the kilogram of rice. So you can see in Sheikhupura, although emission reduction was, because the yield increase there was some yield increase and there was slight reduction in emissions, we managed to reduce emission intensity or carbon intensity by 16%. However, in Okara, because there was 30% yield increase and 70% of emission decrease, that impact was much higher. So the overall carbon intensity, we managed to increase it by 87%, which is significant. So just wrapping it up, I think that's very encouraging results, and we need to continue this. But I think we need to also look at the bigger picture. The management, as you can see, when we look at the sustainability, management is only one part of it. We need to improve our varieties, because when we increase yield, our carbon footprint of rice also decreases there, because the emissions remain the same, but production goes high, that we reduce our carbon footprint of 1 kilogram of rice. And of course, the environment, by environment we mean both aerial environment, but also the soil environment, where, for example, rainfall has a big influence. Then also the soil type, as we have sites we looked at, very different situation. So we need to, whenever we are looking at an, it's usually G by E by N, genetics by environment by management. And spatial variability, we've only looked at 2 sites, and it's already shown us drastic change variability. So we need to, of course, we can't measure every district, but this is where modeling comes in. I think we're working closely, discussing this with our partners in ERI as well, that we need to ramp up our modeling efforts. But of course, we cannot just start playing with models. We need data to calibrate those models. Without our data, we cannot run a model. So I think that's, again, one of the reasons of these, we are collecting a lot of this data. This will go into those models, that once we have confidence in those models, we can run the model for every district of Pakistan. And also that will help us determine, for example, right now we have one registered carbon market project,
But if you ask an investor, where should I do my carbon market project? They need to have a really good special map of saying, okay, this is where I get the highest mitigation potential. And that's equals dollars. And without that information, it's really random right now. I think it's based on convenience. People are going, okay, I think I know someone in Sheikhupura, so I'll do my project over there. Someone says, I know someone in Sakar, so I'll do it there. But that's not how it should be done, because this is a business decision. And business decision needs to be on some economics. So we need this data for that. And I think as we've seen, of course, numbers look really fancy and encouraging. We need to look at more data, more seasons. And once we do that, I think that's when we will have a really good understanding. And I think we cannot do that without really having good research literacy. Our friends from university are here, and I think they're doing a fantastic job, and we are working closely with them, and we need to keep supporting our research community to really realize this. With that, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.